The first thing anyone noticed about Thomas Hale was the sound. Every morning before sunrise, the rhythmic clang of hammer on iron rolled through the misty valley like a heartbeat. It was steady, strong, and strangely comforting, a promise that someone in Hollowbrook still believed in honest work. Thomas's forge sat at the edge of the village, where cobblestones gave way to open fields and fog crept in from the river. His arms were thick from years of labor, his hair touched with early gray, and yet there was a gentleness in him that few expected from a man who wrestled with fire for a living. The children adored him because he always fixed their toys. The widows trusted him because he refused extra payment. Even the priest said the blacksmith's hammer sang truer than the church bell. But Thomas lived alone. He had once been a husband, long ago, before fever took his wife and unborn child in a single cruel week. Since then he had spoken little, laughed rarely, and poured everything he had left into steel. The forge became both his prison and his prayer. On a gray afternoon in late autumn, while he was shaping a set of hinges for the schoolhouse, a strange hush fell over Hollowbrook. The wind shifted, cold and sharp, and with it came a whisper from the baker's wife running down the road. "She's back, the cursed woman." Thomas looked up from his anvil, the glow of molten metal flickering against his face. Out beyond the hedges, he saw a solitary figure trudging along the muddy path, cloak torn, hair clinging to her cheeks. She carried no pack, no companion, only a small satchel and eyes the color of distant rain. Her name was Alara. No one in Hollowbrook spoke it aloud anymore. They called her the jinxed one, the woman who brought storms, sickness, and misfortune wherever she went. 2 summers ago, she had come to the village seeking work as a seamstress. A week later, lightning struck the granary, a farmer broke his leg, and a child fell ill. Superstition did the rest. They drove her away with stones and curses. Now she had returned. As she passed the forge, villagers slammed shutters and bolted doors. Thomas saw the fear twist across their faces like a shadow. And yet what he saw in hers was not malice or madness, but hunger, exhaustion, and quiet shame. She was soaked to the bone, shivering, one boot torn open at the toe. When she stumbled, dropping her satchel, Thomas moved before he could think. He caught her arm. Her skin was ice cold. "You should rest," he said. "You'll catch your death in this weather." Her gaze flickered upward, wary. "You don't know who I am." "I do," he replied. "And I don't care." He guided her inside the forge, ignoring the way the baker's wife gasped behind the window. The air inside was thick with heat and the scent of iron. Thomas wrapped her in a wool blanket, set a kettle over the fire, and pretended not to notice her tears as she held her hands to the flames. "You shouldn't have helped me," she murmured. "People will hate you for it." Thomas shrugged. "They already think I'm odd. Might as well give them reason." That was the first time Alara smiled, a fragile, trembling thing that looked as though it might break if anyone stared too long. As the night deepened, thunder rumbled in the distance. Thomas offered her his bed and took the bench near the forge. She protested, of course, but he only said, "I sleep better where I can hear the fire." When she finally drifted off, he sat watching the coals fade to orange, wondering why his chest ached with something he hadn't felt in years, the stubborn warmth of hope. When dawn crept through the cracks of the shutters, Alara was already awake. She sat at the edge of the bed, hands clasped tightly, as though bracing for punishment. The blanket slipped from her shoulders, revealing faint scars across her wrists, delicate, pale reminders of a past she did not yet dare to speak of. Thomas pretended not to notice. He stoked the fire, poured her a cup of tea, and said only, "You'll need strength if you plan to travel." "I shouldn't stay," she replied softly. "Every time I do, something bad happens." He looked up from the fire, his eyes steady. "Maybe nothing will this time." Her lips trembled. "You don't understand. People get hurt because of me. Then let them blame me," he said simply, handing her the cup. "I've been alone long enough to stand a little trouble." For a moment, Alara said nothing. Then the faintest laugh escaped her, a sound so fragile it felt like breaking glass. Outside, the village had already begun to buzz with rumor. Children were called indoors, merchants whispered in corners. The blacksmith had taken in the cursed woman, they said. The fool had welcomed misfortune itself. By midday, Thomas's shop stood empty. No customers came. Even the priest passed by without greeting. But Thomas kept the forge burning, hammering through the silence as though each strike could drown out their fear. Alara stayed in the corner, mending an old coat of his with precise, careful stitches. When she worked, her face softened, every movement patient, purposeful, like someone who had spent years trying to fix what could not be fixed. As dusk settled, she finally spoke. "I wasn't always like this." Thomas set down the hammer and listened. "I was born in Greystone, near the coast," she began, her voice far away. "My mother was a healer. She could ease pain, mend wounds, sometimes even cure fever. But when the mayor's child died despite her care, they said she was a witch. They burned her home, with her inside. She swallowed hard. I was 17. Thomas's jaw tightened. I ran. For months I wandered from village to village. And every time misfortune followed, a storm, a fire, a sickness. People said I carried my mother's curse. I started to believe it myself. So I stopped staying anywhere too long." She looked up, eyes glistening in the firelight. "You should send me away, Thomas. Before the curse takes something from you too." He studied her quietly, then reached across the workbench and placed a hand over hers. "Alara," he said, "I've lost more than most men could bear. If your curse means company at my table and laughter in my house again, then let it fall on me." She turned away, blinking back tears. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to her not as a danger, but as a person. That night, thunder rolled again in the distance, and Thomas felt a strange calm settle over him. Whatever came, he decided, he would face it beside her. The next few days brought an uneasy peace. Alara stayed mostly indoors, helping with chores and repairing whatever she could find: a torn curtain, a broken bellows, a rusted latch. She worked silently, almost reverently, as if fixing small things might somehow mend the pieces of her heart. Thomas watched her grow stronger. The dark circles beneath her eyes faded, and sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, she would hum softly, old coastal tunes she remembered from her mother's garden. Those quiet moments filled the forge with something it hadn't known in years, warmth that wasn't from fire. But peace in Hollowbrook never lasted long. On the fourth night, the sky broke open. Winds howled through the valley, ripping tiles from rooftops and snapping branches like twigs. Lightning danced above the church steeple, and the villagers, trembling in their homes, muttered the same fearful word: curse. By dawn, the river had overflowed, flooding the lower fields. Livestock drowned, fences washed away. And when the first villagers saw smoke rising from the blacksmith's forge, mistaking the glow for fire, they screamed that the witch's curse had come for them all. A crowd gathered by noon. Torches, shovels, angry faces lit by superstition. Thomas stepped outside before they could reach the door. His sleeves were rolled, his face streaked with soot, but his voice was calm. "Go home," he said. "There's no curse here, only a storm. She brings it." The baker's wife shouted. "Ever since you took her in, the skies have turned against us." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. The priest stepped forward, holding a wooden cross. "Thomas," he said gravely, "you are a good man, but goodness blinds you. Evil hides in kindness's shadow." Thomas clenched his jaw. "There's no evil here, only a woman who's suffered enough." "Then let her prove it." Someone yelled. "If she's no witch, let her heal the flood, stop the rain." From inside, Alara heard it all. Her heart pounded like a drum. She had run from so many towns before, always chased by fear, but this time, someone stood for her. And she couldn't let him fall because of her. She opened the door. Her hair clung to her wet face, and her eyes blazed not with power but with courage. "If you believe the curse is mine," she said, voice steady, "then take me, not him." Thomas turned sharply. "Alara, no." But she stepped past him, barefoot in the mud. "Please," she told the crowd, "just let him be." The villagers hesitated, uneasy. The priest began to pray under his breath. Then, without warning, the church bell tolled. Once, twice, and on the third ring, lightning struck the steeple, splitting it in half. Flames erupted against the rain. Gasps turned to screams. People ran toward the fire, others fell to their knees, shouting that the witch had brought judgment. Thomas grabbed a bucket and ran toward the church. Alara followed. Together, they formed a line to the river, hauling water, shouting orders. He could feel her beside him, fearless, determined, saving the very people who condemned her. By nightfall, the flames were out, the rain had stopped, and the village stood in stunned silence. The steeple was gone, but no lives were lost. And then, from the crowd, a small voice spoke. The miller's daughter, barely 10 years old, stepped forward clutching her doll. "The lady helped us," she said. "The lady saved us." The crowd wavered, shame creeping into their faces. Alara swayed, exhausted, mud streaked across her dress. Thomas caught her before she fell, holding her close as the villagers lowered their torches one by one. That night, the village was quiet. For the first time in years, Hollowbrook's fear had burned itself out in its own fire. But Thomas knew the true storm had only just begun, inside his heart.